𝗏𝗏 is the digital platform that provides sustainable and transferable cotton sourcing, helping to connect farm-level sustainability data with supply chains, enabling greater transparency, accountability, and trust across the cotton value chain. The reason why we're having this conversation today is simple. We all know for the fact that traceability is no longer optional, whether the demand is coming because of the sustainability commitments, emerging regulations in the market, risk management, or consumer expectations. But now is the time that organizations all across the textile sector are under growing pressure to actually prove the origin, compliance, and environmental footprint of the textile products. Not only this, but also where the raw materials are coming from and how they're produced. So before I officially begin, a very quick housekeeping points. The session will be recorded and the presentations and the recording will be made available for the participants after the webinar. If you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat box because we have a dedicated Q&A session by the end of the webinar, and we'll try to cover as many of your questions. Now, I will quickly walk you through the agenda for the webinar and how the next hour will run. Today, we will be hearing from 4 speakers, each bringing a different vantage point on what it actually takes to trace cotton from the field to the final garment. So on the lineup today, we have with us Professor Hilde Heim from Manchester Fashion Institute, and she'll brief us about the emerging technologies in the market of traceability and how enterprises can adopt them. After that, we have with us Mr. Saqib Sohail, a seasoned expert from Front Textiles, and he'll share his knowledge and insights on sustainable cotton production, ESG mandates, and equitable supply chains. After that, we have with us Mr. Peter Bors, advisor to True Cotton, and he will be sharing his insights on data labeling and materials innovation in the textile sector. Last but not the least, we have with us Ms. 𝗛𝗏𝗾, who is the co-founder of Soil Sisters, and she'll share on where it actually, the traceability breakdowns between farm and the label and how we can fix it. So we will close with your questions and some final takeaways. So let's get started. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Hilde Heim from Manchester Fashion Institute. Hilde's research specializes in digital product passports and sustainability compliance, exploring how emerging technologies in the market can actually help small enterprises to meet their regulatory obligations and improve transparency. Much of her work is about a fair and practical transition and helping SMEs navigate genuinely complex regulations without being left behind. Hilde, it's wonderful to have you here. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Eamon. I'll try and share my screen now. I'm not sure if you need to stop sharing so that I can share. Thank you. I'll just take a minute. And I'll put it into presenter mode if that's okay with you. It all takes a little bit of time, doesn't it? So, Eamon, hopefully that's working now. I'll get started. So many years ago...
It's just loading. Yes,
great. Many years ago, before I entered academia, I owned a bridal business. And every so often, a bride would return after her wedding and say something like, Hilde, I'm going to start a wedding event planning business. Naturally, I would ask why. And the answer was almost always the same. Now that I've been through planning a wedding, I can see all the pitfalls. I just want to make it easier for future brides. I remember thinking that might not be quite as easy as you imagine, but I understand exactly how you feel, why you might feel that way. When people experience a major life event, they often develop a desire to help others navigate the same journey more smoothly. In many ways, that's exactly what we are doing with the Manchester Fashion Institute Textiles Transparency team. Over the last several years, we've worked with brands, manufacturers, technology providers, standards organizations,
Sorry, Hilde, we can't hear you. You just froze.
Policymakers and researchers. It's easy. Sorry?
Yes, please carry on.
Today, I'd like to share a few practical observations from that work for businesses, especially SMEs, staying informed and compliant amid a landscape of overlapping rules, standards and deadlines that are often quite lengthy, written in legal jargon and scattered across jurisdictions. This creates a major challenge. The challenge is not that SMEs don't want to be transparent. The challenge is knowing where to start. For SMEs who are often operating with small teams and limited resources, this can feel overwhelming. The good news is that nobody is expected to solve everything at once. The reality is that most organizations are on a journey. The important thing is to begin building capability step by step. Organizations across the sector are working together to help. Support does exist, resources exist, training exists, and much of it is affordable if you know where to look. As a research team, the first thing we needed was a dedicated space to exchange knowledge. The FastTrack's knowledge exchange platform was developed by our team to connect researchers, industry professionals, and policymakers around critical issues in fashion, sustainability, transparency, and innovation. The site shares insights, case studies, and tools, and also hosts the reports, guidelines, and digital resources currently being developed by the team. Feel free to join us along this journey. Our next task was to gather together all the legislation that may affect the fashion industry. We identified close to 100 legislative provisions that were either laws, regulations, strategies, directives, and so on. Each legal provision has different requirements. We listed and added them all to a spreadsheet that we then began to populate with relevant categories like the jurisdiction, the scope, the size of firm, and where and for what kind of product and or service it affected. We created a summary page for each piece of legislation with a short list of the main obligations, links to the law, relevant eco-credentials, and digital solutions. We have uploaded 85 single-page summaries of each legal provision to the FastTrack's website. We also realised that standards, certifications, and other eco-credentials are important in verifying sustainable practice, but this might be too much to add to the spreadsheet. We separately identified and listed over 80 eco-standards that might help firms in their compliance. We then mapped the regulations from the database to the eco-standards. Unfortunately, it did not make things any less confusing. It also shows the imbalance between the various forms of legislation and standards. Next, we evaluated around 70 digital solutions providers to give brands an objective Trustpilot style evaluation of the solutions available to them. Again, although they are meant to solve problems, DPP providers tend to cause more anxiety than they seem to resolve. They are very costly, time-consuming, and confusing for SMEs. Also, you need to be sure of the services you will be getting from a particular solutions package. That's why we built a knowledge base of the solutions available and the capabilities they provide. But these knowledge bases still looked quite dense and confusing. We felt the need to create a filter system. In other words, which law is relevant to which business, and then which might be the best potential certifications and or digital solutions that provide a match. For this reason, we created a diagnostic tool that fashion firms would be able to access on the FastTrack's website. They can find out which regulations actually apply to their firms and what their compliance obligations might be. If all of this feels complex, you are not alone. This is where our team at Manchester Fashion Institute aims to contribute. We see ourselves as occupying an important middle ground. We are not legal advisors, we are not software vendors, and instead we help translate complexity. We realise reviewing laws manually is a challenge. For this reason, we have started work with another tech partner on an AI solution. This solution will update information in real time with the help of natural language models. This means that instead of answering the survey questions that I talked about before, you can ask your own question in a chatbot style and then receive a tailored answer. The difference between this and asking open access chats is that the results will be vetted and ring-fenced to avoid any inaccuracies. In other words, we're going to check the background information that we put into a closed AI environment. We hope to roll this out in the next months. We have compiled a snapshot of our initiatives here, and we hope you find these useful. We are continuously monitoring the regulatory and digital solutions landscape, so you don't have to. We engage directly with SMEs, and we offer training on digital transformation, either on campus or in the workplace. One of the most common questions we receive is, what should I focus on first? Our suggestion is usually very practical. First, understand your supply chain. Are you listing all your suppliers and their credentials? Are you capturing all of the information? And this is where True Cotton will come in. Second, identify the regulations and standards that are relevant to your business. And importantly, what information are the regulations asking for? Do you have the list? Not every regulation applies to every company. The FastTrack's database might help with this. Third, begin by improving data quality. This means be consistent with your lists, spreadsheets, and vocabularies. You don't need perfect data on day one, but you do need to start building systems that and protocols that can collect information consistently. For instance, the SURPASS website has good resources on standardizing the terms you use. And fourth, think about digitalization as an enabler rather than an administrative burden. Good digital systems can reduce effort, improve visibility, and create new opportunities. The good news is that a growing support ecosystem already exists. There are excellent resources available through official channels like SURPASS2, which is the EU think tank. There are practical guides and industry support services in the UK, for example, through the UKFT. And additionally, our FastTracks platform brings together guidance, reports, technology reviews, and educational resources specifically designed for the fashion sector. We encourage businesses not to try to solve everything alone. Many organizations have already done the substantial work that can help accelerate progress. The challenge is often knowing where to find reliable information and how to interpret it. We're also continuing to innovate. Again, this brings us to our work with TrueThreads. We are currently collaborating with organizations such as 𝗧𝗏 and True Cotton to explore how digital solutions can simplify data collection, traceability, and compliance processes. Ultimately, a successful transition will not happen because regulations demand it. It will happen because businesses are given the tools, knowledge, and support they need to participate. Our role is to help make that transition as fair, practical, and inclusive as possible. So my final message today is simple. We help businesses understand what regulations mean in practical operational terms. We help explain technology options. We evaluate digital solutions so SMEs do not have to assess every platform independently. And we work with technology providers, standards bodies, policymakers, and regulators to understand what is emerging and what it means for industry. Importantly, our researchers have decades of experience working directly in fashion. I look forward to further discussions with you.
Thank you very much, Hilde. I must say, wonderful work you're leading at Manchester Fashion Institute, and that was a very clear picture of how technologies in the traceability market can lower the barrier rather than an entry to raise it, right? And by making transparency practical for smallholder players matters so much. So moving on to the second speaker, we have with us Mr. Saqib Sohail from Front Textiles, and Saqib's work more focuses towards the ESG mandates and operations, optimization, sustainable cotton and community programs. Very glad to share that he is a recipient of Ryan Young Climate Award, Vogue Business 2024 Innovator, and a member of 𝗙𝗏𝗃𝗃 Steering Committee. And through all of it, Saqib aims to build supply chains that are just and equitable. Saqib, over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Evan. And that was a wonderful presentation, Hilde, and especially those cross linkages between the standards and COCs and the laws and regulations. Amazing, right? But that is a good segue for me to talk about how difficult it is when you start going and taking these things upstream in the supply chain. And this is what we are doing at Front Textiles. We are a consulting organization who help the stakeholders in sourcing, making their operations better, and also helping them understand how to implement all these regulations and programs. Especially this topic is around cotton, right? How do you make cotton farming sustainable in the current scenario? How do you inculcate ESG in there and still make it economically viable for the farmers? An interesting piece of information I was reading today, which showed that cotton farmers in Pakistan were happy that they got around 15 to 16 mounds per acre for their yield in this year, which is amazing. Why? Because it went down to 12, 13 last year and came up to 15. But in the bigger picture, it has come down from 30, 34 mounds per acre to 15. Now think about that. When you take all of this, all these regulations, all these developments, requirements to a farmer, to that community, and ask them to spend more time and money on that, put more effort into making sure they're part of the system, but if they're not able to make any money out of what they're doing, this is going to go down. Plus, at the same time, they are being regarded as villains of environment, that they're using too much water, they're using too much resources, without realizing that the impact that cotton farming has had on the community is huge. Because it's just not the crop that is being harvested, it's the whole community which moves along and helps them grow. So for me, whenever I'm talking about supply chains, the important point is just and equitable supply chains. Because if we want to move forward in this area to create digitally traceable supply chains, which are also validated through all the regulations and laws, you need to bring those people along who are at the source of the product. And right now, if you go and talk to the people at the source, you will only find confusion. Why? Because one of the Hilde's slides is very important for that. How many different set of regulations and standards are there? I can go to the farmer with regenerative farming, organic farming, regen agri, organic regenerative, sustainable cotton, BCI, and so many different programs are out there. And all of them are trying to do the same thing in one way or another. But for a farmer, it's very confusing. For the whole supply chain, it's very confusing. They are looking for conversions, and this is becoming more divergent day by day. To make them understand how they are the most important call, most important gear in the whole sustainable supply chain, takes a lot more than just bringing standards to them. They ask us that, why is it important for a farmer to report their emissions? Why is it important for a farmer to understand their soil parameters? And is it only for the benefit of the downstream supply chain, or is it going to benefit the farming community itself? So to let them understand that part, most of the time it gets skipped. It's important that the tier 2, 3 onwards is scope 3 emissions for most of the tier 1 and retailers. They are very important because this is one of the most neglected areas. And when it comes to sustainability reporting and creating impact, this is the area which needs the most amount of time and effort. And to take them there, a total picture has to be painted for the supply chain, which will mean that we don't only talk about the crop, but you also talk about the people who are sowing the crop. You also talk about their economics. How does it make it viable for them with continuing regulations and all? But also, how can we support them? And the support has to come from everyone from downstream supply chain. And how do you do that? And the solution for that is bring them to the table at the start of the program, co-create solutions together with them. Do not bring them in when you have a solution in your head, when you have never even seen a cotton farm, when you've never seen a manufacturing facility. So it's important that you co-create the solution together with them. That's how you are able to scale it. You have to make them understand that why that emission that is coming from the cotton farm is not detrimental or is detrimental to the climate around them. You know, cotton farming and the farmers have been growing cotton especially in Pakistan, in areas which has been hit by extreme climate and extreme heat in the past few years. What that means is 1 year there is going to be a lot of floods, and another year there is going to be drought. So it's very difficult for them to understand when do we start working, when do we start sowing, when do we start the harvest. And with continuous confusion, a lot of them have moved away from farming cotton. They have been missing their targets of per acre sowing that we needed this year. That incidentally converts to farmland which is not going to be farmed for cotton, which might go to a housing scheme or might go to a crop which is more water intensive or which is more resource intensive. So to link that impact with the crop, then linking it with the product that the textile manufacturer will be making, doing the whole life cycle assessment, doing not only the product traceability, but also the environmental traceability, and then linking that all together with economic performance of the crop. That's the first step for me. And once you start taking that first step, then the solutions start to come. Otherwise, just pointing fingers at the cotton farmers are taking too much resources, the processing mills are taking too much resources, and everyone is going in circles. So the point that I'm trying to make is start to co-create, start looking at the problem not with the lens of blaming someone or penalizing someone. I've seen a lot of regulations which are not incentivizing for the supply chain to move towards initiating or creating programs which will help the environment. It's more of how do we penalize someone? And that is not the way that you will move forward. So if we want everyone to work together, we need to bring everyone on the table at the same time, co-create the solution together with them, use the resources that we have, and then link it digitally, show the economic solution to all the members of the supply chain. And then you will have a true impactful program that is not only working for the retailers, the regulators, but also the people who are actually creating those products. So with this, I would close and hand over the floor to Ayman, and hopefully we'll have some interesting questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Saqib. I think a very powerful reminder that sustainable cotton isn't only an environmental story. I believe it's a human one. And that linking sustainability and performance to market access is what actually makes it stick at the farm and the community level. So you really touched to the importance of credible data, and that takes us neatly to our next speaker, because the question of how we communicate that data all the way to the consumer is exactly his focus. So I would like to welcome Mr. Peter Ghosh, advisor to True Cotton. Peter, by profession, he is a textile researcher and a creator of Garments Facts label that has been featured in the Vogue business. His research at Cranfield University on regenerated cellulosic fibers with natural dyes was showcased at the Future Fabrics Expo. And his design work has earned an Audi Design Foundation Award. So welcome, Peter. The floor is yours. Hello, Peter. Can you hear me?
Hello. Yeah. Thank you. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the previous speakers. My talk will be a little bit different to the others. So I trained as an industrial designer many years ago, and I think that gives you a curiosity about how products are made. And so what materials are used and how materials are formed. I had my own brand for about 10 years. And so we thinking of ideas and then trying to put them into production, then trying to sell them. And as part of that brand, we had a small clothing collection, and that was my first introduction to textiles. So we didn't design the garments, we bought blanks, and we produced illustrations for them, screen printed them, and then sold them into retailers. From then on, I managed to get myself involved in a textile research project at Cranfield University, which was we were manufacturing cellulose filament fibres, and we were trying to embed natural dyes into them. And this sort of enhanced my curiosity about textiles. And I'm someone I've always been interested in labeling because I have a medical condition where I have to check labels. So I have an autoimmune condition, which means that I have a restricted diet, and it's a lifelong condition, and there's no drug treatment, no cure. So to keep my symptoms at bay, I have to check food labels. I have to check everything that I eat and drink, so I avoid certain foodstuffs. So I'm constantly checking labels. So I've always had a curiosity about labels, and because of kind of combination of working on a textile research project and then having this medical condition, when I looked at textile labels, I felt as though they really didn't reflect the product. So for me, I regard textiles as a very complex consumer product. And when I looked at the standard label, they said next to nothing. They said country of origin. I mean, for me, if I was buying a cotton t-shirt, then I would expect the country of origin to be where the cotton is grown, but that really isn't the case. So I found the information was too small and confusing. So I set about trying to, not exactly sure why, but just purely from curiosity, but I set about designing what I would regard as a more detailed label for textiles. And I really did this as a standalone project, purely out of curiosity. I had no industry backing, so I didn't have any brand partner. It wasn't my official textile research at Cranfield University. It really was a standalone project. I simply had a small network of people who had expertise in certain aspects of textiles. And so I just asked myself the questions, as a consumer, what information would I like to see on a textile label? And that led me to selecting a series of metrics. And I also felt as though that as consumers, we're so bombarded with marketing information. I mean, everything has is covered in a blanket of marketing information. And that's purely design. There's lots of expertise in creating marketing imagery and copy, and that's purely designed to sell you the product. But is that enough now that we know that our ecosystems are under huge amount of pressure with all the stuff that we're manufacturing? So as consumers, do we need to know more about the products that we're buying? So that was the sort of fundamental basis of I'd hoped it would have an educational role for consumers. And so I tried to create what I would regard as an alternative narrative for textiles. And that narrative would be based upon, I mean, if you were going to ask yourself, what should be mentioned about textiles, what goes into them? And I kind of found myself thinking that, well, you have to mention something about chemicals because, our textiles are highly processed consumer products. So you've got to say something about chemicals. They shed microfibers. Should we say something about microfibers on textile labels? Should we say something about the people who help produce our clothes? And so what I did was that I just basically selected a series of metrics which I felt were linked together. And then I asked people in my network who were experts in individual fields such as chemicals. And I sort of created this format that where the description of a textile was based upon data from a series of metrics. And I called this the garment facts label. And all I did was I simply did a post about it on LinkedIn, and the post went viral. And then I started getting lots of questions about it. And I'd personally like to thank Professor 𝗧𝗏𝗪 probably don't pronounce his name like this, but so he approached me. He works at the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York. He approached me and he said that he really liked the concept that I'd created on textile labeling, and he said he'd like to bring it to FIT and he'd like his students to use it. And so that was the first opportunity I had for it, and I've worked with him. So he kindly invited me to talk to his students, and together with his students and FIT's material partners, we've created a number of garment facts labels. So when their fashion design students create their garments, they also have to create a garment facts label with it. And then in their fashion shows, that's displayed. They either put them on hang tags or they put them on behind QR codes. And then what happened from that is that obviously editors are invited to these fashion shows, and then it was published in Vogue Business, and then from Vogue Business it was nominated for the Global Change Awards in 2025. So you can see just by having a curiosity about something. So I think it's an example that you can do a project by yourself and add no expectations for it, and then it can lead to so many other things. And I've also worked on recently helping brands with labeling for their bedding. It was one of the most recent projects. But it's and then now you've got the DPP coming, which is again is going to provide consumers with information. So I still think there's a lot of discussion that needs to be held around what information should be on a textile label. And it's because some of the metrics that I used are very unlikely they're not going to be included in the DPP. So the DPP excludes any social metrics. So I mean, should you exclude the people who make our clothes? I mean, I think that's an important question to ask. And yeah, I think I'll leave it there. So I probably should have given you a slide to give an example of the garment facts label, but if anyone would like to see it, I'd be happy to show it to them afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I think the idea of the garment facts label, the idea of giving people a very clear and data-driven picture of impact in the same way as the nutrition label does, right? So I think it's a very intuitive way to close the knowledge gap. And your work on the materials innovation, I think it shows that research and design really can translate into practical outcomes. And that actually brings us to our final speaker, because all of this, the technology, the data, the labeling, it depends on one thing, traceability, and how it actually holds together all the way from farm to the way to the end, to the brand label, right? So for our final speaker, we have with us 𝗧𝗏𝗪, co-founder of Soil Sisters. It's an independent agency connecting fashion and beauty brands with regenerative natural fiber supply chains. She has over 15 years of experience in the textile industry, and 𝗧𝗏𝗪 specializes in supply chain transparency, social and environmental compliance, audits and certifications, and next generation materials. So she will be taking us right to the heart of the matter. Where does traceability break down and how do we fix it? Regina, over to you. Let me just check and let me just unmute you. So, Regina, you can check.
Now I can also answer. Thank you. I'm good. Maybe if you have the possibility also to allow me to switch on my camera, that would be fantastic.
Okay.
And please also share my slides I've sent to you earlier. Great. All right, here we go. Thank you so much. Thank you, Eamon. Sorry for the small technical backlog. I'm very happy to be with you on this panel. Thank you to the former speakers. Hilde, I can't wait to dive into the tools you showed to us. I'm really excited to have a look at those in detail. And thank you, 𝗧𝗥, for also pointing out the necessity of the farmers to be involved into the dialogue, which is also our topic. And also thank you, Peter, for pointing out which possibilities lie ahead of us in terms of looking at the label. So I don't know if you are able to see, now the slides are uploaded. Wonderful, thank you. So this is Miriam with me. So we are the founders of a company called Soil Sisters, and we are backed by the University Leuphana. And we are a non-profit organization, and we do care about the soil and we do care about the nature. And what we are doing is that we talk with brands and consumers about natural fibers which are grown, and also about natural ingredients for the beauty industry and for the pharma industry. And we shed light on the possibilities how to build supply chains that really help the nature to strive and really help to build resilient supply chains. So I have a background as a fashion designer, but I also got graduated from Leuphana University with an MBA in sustainability management, as well as my co-founder Miriam. And I have worked for many, many years as a sustainability manager. And I've been to a lot of factories during the last years. I have seen factories in Bangladesh, in Myanmar, in China, and we try to convince also buyers to take care about the factories and also to care about the people within the factories. But during the last years, especially when we look at materials, we see that the current textile and beauty industries are a linear catastrophe for the nature and the people. Next slide, please. I just brought to you a few numbers. I'm sure you know most of them, but I just want to point out two numbers which are really astonishing and also leave a lot of ground for us to act now. And we really need the brands to get their buy-in and also to take care about these problems, because at the moment we see that 70% of our textiles are made from synthetic fibers. That is a linear catastrophe that ends up at landfills, it ends up in our ocean, and it ends up in our bodies. And we, as the textile industry, have the power to change that. At the same time, we know that around 50% of the arable land is covered by cotton monocultures. And this is also a huge problem because we know about the problems of monocultures in cotton. But there is, with the latest technologies and also with solutions which are already there with innovations, but also traditional methods, there is a way to change this. So think about 15% is a huge, huge area. And if we are able to convert only a small part of these 15% into farmland that is giving nature back positivity and restoring ecosystems, this would have a huge impact and not only would cut down emissions, but also would give the people and the brands the possibility to do insetting directly within their supply chains. And you know from the speakers we already listened to that there are tools available. Okay, Eamon, please go to the next slide. So just briefly about us, what we are doing as soil sisters. So we really have our name soil in our heart because we do care about the soils. But we do not only care about the soil, we empower communities, we build resilient supply chains, and we care about nature protections. So what we do at the moment is, for example, we are having small plots in Uganda next to a big refugee camp in 𝗪𝗪𝗃, and we give plots to people living in this refugee camp, and they can grow their own food on these soils. And from these soils, we generate biochar. And this biochar is then put again back into the soil and works as a carbon sink. And we also expand this procedure to the cotton fields, which are surrounded by the in the refugee camp. So we apply this mechanism into the cotton fields and are able to build from this regenerative business models for cotton farmers, so they have an additional income. And at the same time, which is really the biggest part of our work, is we try to develop this insetting models for fashion companies, so they understand that if they invest now into the supply chains, if they now build resilient supply chains, in future they will also have cotton, because if they're not investing now, maybe farmers decide to go away from the land, leave the land, and we don't have any support of cotton anymore. And of course, we also work towards giving brand security to navigate a very, very complex landscape of the EU regulatory. So next slide, please, Eamon. So this is me working in a fashion company and being tortured as a sustainability manager in many, many ways, because yeah, we have a very, very strict landscape to cover with the regulatory pressure. And we also at the moment have fast moving consumer trends. So people and influencers are very, very strict. What they see on the label, they check it, they go back to the details, they want to know everything. So this can also be a very representational risk for a brand if they don't meet the expectations and also are not fully transparent with what they show to us. And at the same time, we have the farmers who are suffering from a situation which is really, really bad. We have, for example, in companies where we feel the heat stress, we have droughts, we have extreme weather events, and the yields are going down. So we know both realities. We know the realities of the farmers, but also the realities inside of companies. Next slide, please. So what we also know is that the impact that is happening, the impact that is really helping to restore nature, is happening at the farm. Instead of that, the value is captured downstream. So only a very, very small proportion of the investment is going into the fields, into the plots, into the farms, and we are here to change that. Next slide. So I just brought to you one example, which is the example of carbon farming, which has the fantastic features of turning soil health into a second income stream for farmers. And this is how it goes. The farmer is adopting practices. So what we see wonderfully with 𝗧𝗪 ecosystem and with true cotton, that it really works. And when we apply a biochar, enriched biochar, we really see a yield increase for about 40%. And this is also giving an extra profit to the people working in the cotton fields, but also an additional income during the year if we later on have the possibility to really sell the cotton carbon credits later on. Looking at the time, next slide, please, Eamon. So when we talk to brands and when we talk about how to navigate not only a landscape, but all in terms to really build up resilient supply chain, invest into cotton, invest into the farmers, we typically ask the brands a few questions, because at the moment, most of the brands are not fully aware about their traceability, about their supply chain activities. And this is exactly where True Cotton can help, because True Cotton already covers the first mile. And we also need to talk about transition financing terms. And when we look at regenerative finance mechanism, this is exactly how we can bridge the time between when the farmer is going into transition from monoculture into ecological practices or even into regenerative practices, that they have an additional income through biochar during the season and also when the seasons are down. And we also ask the brands if they have already set science-based targets. And we are also here to help that. But I'm sure if you look up the tools we have presented here by Hilde, but also by True Cotton, we can see that there are a lot of ways to really demonstrate that nature can have a positive effect on your supply chain and really work towards insetting. And now it's the time really to do the investment into the supply chain. So, and the last question, which is also very important for brands who have also shares and are not equitable from their own power, do they publicly disclose their fiber mix, their sourcing mix? And as I said in the beginning of the session, we really aim for integrating natural fibers into the supply chains, now building up the strategies and the investments to have a resilient supply chain and to help farmers, communities, and the nature to thrive. Okay. Next slide, please. Yeah. So this is Miriam and me reach out to us. We are based in Germany, and we are happy to now go into the discussions with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Regina. I think the way fitting close to the speaking portion, bringing us to full circle from farm to the label and reminding us that consumer trust comes down to the claims that are credible and verifiable. Thank you very much to all four of our speakers, Hilde, Saqib, Peter, and Regina, for your four genuinely complimentary perspectives. So now it's the time for the Q&A session. And if you haven't added any question in the chat box, please drop your questions. And I have got some very interesting questions for the panel. Saqib, first question is for you. If farm level data appears to be removed from the DTP compliance, there's rationale behind this decision, as this data is crucial and should be ideally included. And related to that, another question, that can the DPP truly empower consumers to know what they are buying if the traceability journey begins only after the farm stage?
Thanks, Simon. So I think, unfortunately, there is a big lobby going around in EU, which wants to dilute the data as much as possible, because the people who will be penalized are not ready to take responsibility of their supply chain. And they've been doing this for many decades. And that's why they don't want to divulge into farm level data as much, because they don't have not the ability, but the will to go back, go up, seeing the supply chain and work with them. And that's why we see this dilution in the regulations, this threat that the regulations are coming, but when they come in, they are so diluted that most of the people who were on the fence about them were thinking that when a regulation or is going to come in, it's going to be a catalyst towards action to help the community, to help the supply chain. But that's not the case, unfortunately. And I totally agree with the question that it is crucial because, how do I start measuring anything if I'm going to cut off the main source of the data, right? But like what Peter was saying, if he reads a label and the label does not have half the data, what does that label actually mean? It's meaningless. So, and then the second question links very well to that. How can consumers make informed decisions when the information is half cooked, is misleading, and is not helping them make the right decisions? Because we all know how different the data would look like when you include or to exclude the farming data from a product's life cycle assessment. The amount of resources being used, the fertilizer, the diesel engines, and all of that. So it is crucial because it shows the impact that has been created at the farm level, especially at the soil. The consumers need to know what kind of impact is being created on the soil. If you have ever seen a farm, I've seen farms where the soil is so hard that it won't do anything on its own. The organic content, the organic matter content in the soil in most farms in Pakistan is less than 0.3%, whereas it should be above 3.5%, so that the soil has enough strength to grow on its own without requiring external stimulants like fertilizers and chemicals. So that's why it's important. When you start collecting data, like Peter Drucker said, you cannot improve anything unless you start measuring it. So if you do not measure a major part of the supply chain, you are just pushing back the improvement cycle further and making it more expensive.
Thank you, Saqib. Very wonderfully answered. Next question is, as regulations are increasing in the industry at the risk of creating multiple disconnected traceability systems, so how can we avoid this fragmentation? And I think, Hilde, you would be better suitable to answer this question because you are reviewing all the technology or the traceability systems in the market. Hilde, can you hear me?
Can
you please repeat the question? It's good.
I can't hear you very well. I didn't hear the question at all. If you're speaking to me, I don't know.
Okay, I'll repeat the question. Atiya is asking that as regulations are increasing in the industry where there are multiple disconnected traceability systems available, so how can we avoid this fragmentation?
Was that still to me? Because I didn't hear it exactly. Just one more time, simply, main part of the question.
People are saying that there are multiple traceability systems available in the market, so how we can avoid this fragmentation and come to a single universal solution for the traceability systems in the market?
Right. I think I understand the question now, that there are multiple options, something like that.
Yes.
I'm a little bit concerned, actually, I'm a little bit concerned about quite a few of the comments here today. And that is that, there are questions about how do we understand where it is, what's measured, what's not, how can we take part in this? What worries me about this is that there are channels available for people to be able to take part in this. I don't know if everybody knows, but there's this, the EU Commission has a portal that's called Have Your Say. You can actually speak to the EU Commission directly with your concerns about this. Then there are a lot of open source think tanks that are actually working with the Commission to create the rules and regulations that we actually want. What worries me is that people look at media, sort of industry media, sensationalist stuff, social media, which is all pushing in certain directions and sensationalizing things, but is actually not the truth. There's a lot going on, pushing in a positive direction. And I think it's going to get there. I think it'll be fine as long as we are speaking to the right channels and not just talking in our own little bubbles. That would be my message there. I could answer a little bit more, but I won't take the floor any more than that. But I'd just like to encourage everybody to be aware that there are, you know, official channels that you can use, and they want to hear you, and it will have an effect. That's it.
Thank you, Hilde. So the next question is, what incentives are needed for the farmers and upstream supply chain actors to actively participate in the traceability systems rather than just viewing them as an additional reporting burden? Regina or Peter, would you like to answer this question?
Yeah, thank you, Eamon. So incentivizing farmers is definitely a very, very important topic. And we also need to make sure that the transition finance mechanisms are in place. And I often hear from brands that they are, as also Hilke described, they are confused with so many things are going on at the moment, and they are facing so much pressure from many, many ends. But starting somewhere and getting help from other organizations, getting together with other organizations, and also applying for public funding is possible, because if we work together towards nature positivity, this is a common good. There's a common interest of communities to work towards these goals, to have targets to cut down emissions. So it is okay to apply for funding for these topics, because we are giving something back to the people and to the planet. So the brands need a little bit of help. They need to be navigated through doing the call of interest, the proposals. It's not that easy. I can understand that. But I think not only here, there are so many people who are able to help, so many tools, so many innovators ready to start with something. We just cannot lose more time. We cannot let fast fashion take over at the moment. We really need to have natural fibers in the center of our activities.
Thank you, Regina. We have another question from Abdullah. How can we create a win-and-win for farmers, brands, and other supply chain actors? What are the best incentives? Saqib, would you like to answer this question?
Sure, and also give feedback on the previous questions, because I would respectfully disagree with the general consensus on that. Feedback is open. It's not really open for the global south most of the time, because there might be some places, some areas available for the global north, but that expectation that the global south needs to go in and find those things is difficult. Because to understand the reality of the global south, you have to see, for a general land ownership of a farmer in the global south is not more than 10 to 11 acres, which means there are millions of farmers with very less access to anything outside their area. And to expect them to go outside of their zone and find out about all of this is difficult. Not difficult, pretty much impossible, without any incentive. And that takes me to the next question, that okay, how can it be a win-win for farmers? And the best example that I have is a couple of projects that we did with a couple of brands on organic cotton farming. And that involves brands investing in the implementation of the work, also investing in paying premium to the farmers, and also of offtake agreements. Because without making this a viable business solution, you're not going to give any incentive to any farmer to do anything extra, because they are already under such a lot of burden, right? They're under the climate burden, they're under heat stress, they have their own economic issues, they have the rotating crop problems like we had for the wheat crop when the rates went down the drain and the farmers were thinking, should we ever farm again or not? So among all those burdens, if we can alleviate their economic burden, that don't worry, so as much as you want harvest, and then we are going to offtake all of that crop and convert that into valuable product. And we are also going to pay you extra for all that extra effort that you're doing to grow sustainable cotton. or sustainable any other crop. And that can work. Second one that I've seen, and it also links to another question I saw, that taking sample from other crops, and you can see good examples about fair trade partnerships. We have seen that in coffee beans and other areas as well, that fair trade partnership help the communities bring in more money, bring the profit to the actors who are actually making all the effort, rather than the intermediaries who are just converting that beautiful product into a packaged pair of jeans or a t-shirt which can be sold in retail stores. So taking the money, the effort, the value back to the initial guys, and then giving them the incentive that the more you make that effort, that profit is going to flow back to you. So that creates a win-win situation where farmers are engaged to provide data for traceability, to provide data for ESG, for social work, and all of that. And there was a question about divergence, right? So many different traceability platforms are there, and there are so many audits. There is so much audit fatigue. There are a few organizations trying to do convergence on that so that we don't have multiple areas of reporting. My opinion on that is that the national governments of each country, they have to come into the forefront, create their own regulations and reporting portals, which should be the first point of information for anyone from outside the country to take that data, rather than everyone going in with their own systems. It's difficult, it's not easy, but it is a big part.
Thank you very much, Saqib. I think you have wonderfully covered the questions. I have another question for Peter. How can we bring transparency in labeling to mention the real value of the fiber used in the garment with a simple stoplight chart? Peter, over to you. Peter, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, that it says that the host has to delay to mute, so I wasn't able to. Sorry, could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Sure. So there's a question. How can we bring transparency in labeling to mention the real value of the fiber used in the garment with a simple stoplight chart concept?
Yeah, wow. So can I start with something that Hilde said? So I think Hilde's correct that there are channels open to the EU. There are 50 channels open. I don't, I don't individually make representations to the EU. So, but what I do is that I'm part of something called the Union of Concerned Researchers in Fashion. So I put my views forward to them, and then as collective they make their feelings through the EU channel. So even as an individual, you can, but I'm not as optimistic as Hilde, unfortunately. I wish I was, but I'm not. Because the feedback we get through the Union researchers doesn't really give us that much optimism. So the question is, how do we? I think I probably won't answer the question directly, but so something that I've been thinking about some recently. So in addition to what I'm trying to do now is that I think that I don't think that labeling information and marketing information should be separated. Yeah, I don't think that. So for an example, we have now that we have like you might have a garment and the marketing campaign for that garment is based upon a minority fiber content. So it could be, so you could think you're buying a cotton jacket, but the marketing would let you believe that you're buying, it's like all cotton, but the reality of it will be like 10-15% cotton. So I think there's two elements of information that we have to decide what we really should put in two labels, and I'm not convinced that that's going to happen. As I said in my sort of brief talk, I think things like, I don't see how you can exclude the people who make our clothes. I think we have to put some sort of chemical load for our clothes. I think we have to mention microfibers, because microfibers are the delivery system for the chemicals we use. So how can we put the value of, so I think it's interesting that the value that the industry seems to be putting on natural fibers is that they want to make marketing campaigns from them, but at the same time, the vast majority of the garment is plastic. So, I mean, I can only think of maybe, should we have breakdowns? Should we have breakdowns of the cost? Should we have breakdowns for, I mean, we've got so much space to put data now. So should we have like a breakdown of the retail cost, saying what's the material cost? What's the transport cost? What's the labor cost? I mean, I'm just someone that's curious. I mean, I'm kind of fed up with just, I'm just fed up with all the marketing information, to be honest. I want something to counteract all the marketing information that is just piled upon all our consumer goods. I know that's probably not answered the question directly. I've just gone off on a rant. So I apologize to the person that gave the question there.
No problem. Thank you very much, Peter. I think you have put the right strategic points for the questions. That was all the time we have for questions, and thank you very much to the audience for such thoughtful ones. I think if there's one thread running through everything we have heard today, it says traceability. Is it a single technology or a single label? It's the work of connecting the farm, the data, and the consumer into one trustworthy story. And the tools exist. The challenge now is making them practical, fair, and accessible for everyone in the chain. And that's the job for brands, policymakers, and innovators together. A reminder that this session has been recorded, and the recording and the presentations will be made available on the 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏's website. So do look out for those. And on behalf of 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 and everyone involved in London Climate Action Week, thank you very much to our wonderful speakers for their time and for their wonderful insights. Thank you to everyone else for joining us today. Take care. Goodbye.